Islam, the word that today evokes fear, unconditional obedience, or blind hatred to many, meant at one time quite the contrary. Today, we're not going to talk about Al-Qaeda or al-Baghdadi, but the glorious age of algebra and algorithm. When Umar, the second caliph, entered Jerusalem in the year 637, he declined Sophronia's invitation to pray in the Holy Sepulchre because of the fear that the Muslims would do the same after him and turn the church into a mosque. Besides the religious freedom, he assured the Jewish people their property rights. After staying for 10 days, he returned to Medina. In the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, Muslims prayed in one section of the building and Christians in another. In a little over 100 years after the death of Muhammad, the Islamic Empire overtook the Iberian Peninsula, which is today Spain and Portugal on the west, and stopped the westward expansion of the almighty Tang Dynasty China on the east. As we have said in episode 1, for a people to become a superpower, it has to be powerful in the first place. And that means it has to be fair to its own people, so they will develop the economy to support any expansion, and be reasonable to those who consider it foreign, so it will not spread itself too thin. Many centuries later, when the Muslims were driven southward by the Christian forces in the Iberian Peninsula, the Jews withdrew with them. So we know who their hearts were with. What is known to the West as the medieval Dark Ages, which was probably penned by some Christian clerics, was certainly not dark in Damascus or Baghdad. In fact, it is known to the Muslims as the Golden Ages. In more ways than one, the Islamic Golden Ages laid the foundation for the Italian Renaissance 700 years later. As all fast-developing cultures are accompanied by the development of art, the Islamic power was accompanied by an art renaissance, the rebirth in the tradition of Mesopotamia, Persia, and Byzantine. The number one characteristic feature of the Islamic art is its non-representativeness. Somebody took the second commandment to heart. To us, talking about modern art here, this is especially interesting because many people today consider non-representativeness as a modern concept after Cézanne, Matisse, and Picasso. But make no mistake, we're talking about the 7th and 8th century here. Instead of representations of the figures of Jesus, the Apostles, and Virgin Mary, the Arabs resorted to simple geometry. Mathematically speaking, to cover an area with the same shaped tiles, we have to use rectangles, equilateral triangles, or hexagons, regular or equilateral, of course. That's it, no more. If we have a circular area to cover, either a flat area or a dome, we can always slice the circle equally, like cutting up a pizza. You might think that this is too limited to be aesthetically interesting, let alone intellectually challenging. Let's look at a circle. It is not interesting. If we slice it, it is still not interesting. Put colors on it, this would not do. Try different colors, still nothing. However, if we put some very simple patterns in it, it becomes artistically appealing. Let's look at repeating tiles. Just like the circles, we can always use different colors on different tiles, such as this hexagon tessellation. It looks very boring. If hexagon tessellation is boring, the repetition of different single-color squares could only be worse. Equilateral triangles would not be much better. Let's put some patterns to it. I did this rough sketch in a Costco parking lot, waiting for my flat tire to be changed out. If we duplicate that, it'll be like this. If we put this on a carpet and lay it on the floor, it'll be something like this. Of course, nobody wants this to be in his living room, but if we put this in a greeting hall for a festive occasion to cheer people up, it is not half bad. The green borders are there to show the tessellation. If we take them out, the tiled pattern looks like this. On the floor, it looks like this. With the borders or without the borders? Which one do you like? I like the one without the borders. Perhaps because they hide the tile structure, leaving our brains with less to anchor on, thus making the pattern more mesmerizing. I drew this on paper. It is done pretty much mindlessly. I have no intention of doing anything particular other than just screwing around. This is the tessellation. This is the effect of laying it on the floor. What we see here is the power of the repetition of simple patterns. Let's also note that most of the worshippers then were illiterate. None of them has ever heard of computer games or tried marijuana in college. With no graven images in sight, repetitive patterns like these must be all-consumingly mesmerizing. You know what I want to do at this point? I actually wanted to keep drawing until finishing this house, or at least this room. Let's look at this Mihrab, or prayer niche from Isfahan in today's Iran. Take a little time to look at the weaving details. Are you in yet? Are you thinking about the deeper meanings of life yet? If you need more time, you can stop the video and look at it some more. I don't know any Arabic, but a reliable source said that the inscription at the center means, "The Prophet, may blessing and peace be upon him, said the mosque is the abode of every believer." On a grander scale, this is the Sheikh Lotf Allah Mosque in the same city, Isfahan. Similar images could be found in many mosques, in many places. I long for the day when the State Department could advise that Damascus, Baghdad, Isfahan, and so many other places are as safe to visit as Rome, Paris, and Amsterdam, so I could go to spend some serious time there, to pay my respect, and to worship the artists. So we see quite clearly that without the restrictions of graven images, the repetition of simple geometry could be absolutely fascinating. Of course, in paintings, we don't have to be that restrictive, because we're not fabricating tiles for construction. Also, when we are not restricted to any real-world object, we can pick any color we want. In this one I did in the Costco parking lot, I picked bright color tones. However, in this one, I was more modest. One of the most famous early colorists is probably Henri Matisse. I'm not an art historian, so I don't know whether his interests in color and his interests in Islamic art are in any way dependent on each other. I think this is an interesting subject. If nobody has studied it, somebody may want to spend some time to do a PhD dissertation on it. This is a Gauguin. This is Van Gogh's portrait of Joseph Rouland, a postal employee. Let's put aside the fact that the painting shows that the painter was a lonely and isolated soul. Let's pay attention to the pattern in the back. Now let's look at his famous Starry Night in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Van Gogh did this when he was in Saint-Paul-de-Monceau's asylum for his mental illness. It is easy to imagine that this was his unconsciousness talking. He was not mechanically borrowing Arabesque patterns because he had exhausted his power of imagination. So we see that at this time, almost at the end of his life, the Arabesque patterns were deeply burnt into his mind. It came out unconsciously. Let's dig a little deeper into this. This is a Musée d'Orsay version of the Starry Night. It was painted in Arles, a couple of minutes from the so-called Yellow House, which Van Gogh rented. This one is clearly based on reality, while the MoMA version demonstrated Van Gogh's letting his mind go with the help of his mental illness, maybe. Free from the constraint of reality, the sky, the mountains, the trees, and even the houses are of the same pattern, coalesced into one. In the last episode, we talked about the necessity of viewing art with an open mind. Certainly, it is also true in creating art. I don't mean at all here that the Musée d'Orsay copy is a substandard creation. Earlier this year, I took these pictures. I had to wait for quite a while to get to the front of the crowd to do it. Look at this wet on wet. Look at this expressiveness. Do you want to try your hand at painting? I probably should have taken the trouble to figure out how to put in here Simon and Garfunkel's Starry, Starry Night. I'll see you next time.